We will go ahead and get started. I will call the regular meeting to order for the Ventura County Air Pollution Control Board. Unmuted myself. And we will start with the roll call, please.
Board Member Campos.
Here.
Board Member. Board Member.
I'll take over while they work out the audio issues. We are at Board Member Gurel is absent. Board Member Lavier?
Here.
Board Member Long? Absent. Board Member McQueen-Lejean?
Here.
Board Member Mendez?
Here.
Board Member Parvin?
Here.
Board Member Whitman?
Here.
Board Member Zaragoza?
Here.
Chair Lopez?
Here. All right, and we will, if I can ask Council Member Albert to lead us in the pledge, please. All right, thank you. We are on item 4 minutes of the board meeting of February 12th. Do we have any changes, any corrections, or a motion?
So move.
All right, and all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstentions? Okay. All right, item number 5, we have agenda review, and Mr. Gazemi, do we have any changes or any agendas as is? Okay.
The clerk of the board will just note, we did receive a public comment before the agenda was posted per discussion with county council. That will be added to the public materials for item 6 after your board's meeting today, but no action is required by your board. Thank you.
Thank you for that update, and we don't need action on the agenda review, correct?
Correct.
All right, public comment. Do we have any public speakers?
Thank you, Chair Lopez. To members of the public who wish to address the board today with public comment on any agenda item, please visit ventura.org/COB/APCB for participation information and instructions. For in-person public comment, please check in with the deputy clerk. If you wish to make comments, you must be in the boardroom, or if participating remotely, you must be connected to the meeting via Zoom or telephone before the close of the public comment period for that agenda item. Requests to make live public comments on an agenda item will be accepted until the public comment period for each agenda item is complete. We do not currently have anybody requesting to make general public comment. Thank you.
Thank you. We will move on to board comments. Are there any board members who wish to make any comments? Right. Okay, item number 8, Air Pollution Control Officer comments. I will hand it over to Mr. Gazemi.
Good afternoon, Chair Lopez, members of the board, Ali Ghassemi, Executive Officer of Ventura County APCD. In regard to personnel and vacancy, we are still in the process of filling out the vacancies in our monitoring division. For engineering division, we have done some new changes for operational need and increased efficiency. I moved the emission inventory and toxics programs, which were part of the planning divisions, to engineering divisions, including the staff that handling these 2 programs. I also promoted 2 of the supervisors to interim engineering manager, whom each will assume the responsibility for 6 months. In regard to the APCD program, we continue with our regular activities. All divisions are working on their respective tasks. I'm also pleased to inform you that we received $2.1 million in supplemental environmental project funding for protecting blue wells and blue skies, known as VSR program. We expected also additional of $356,000 more. I'm happy to say that the program is funded for 3 years, 2024 through 2026. That's all I have, and I'm ready to take any question you may have.
Thank you. Mayor Zaragoza?
No, I don't, but I under board comments, I just
I just wanted to share that I want to thank Ali and the APCP board because we had a major fire in Oxnard over at the Sunkist Lemon plant in Oxnard. One of probably the biggest fires I've seen in Oxnard and I'm only 59 years old. Can you imagine that? No, but I just want to thank you. Thank you, Ali, for the report that you gave us. Some of the concerns we had because of the smoke and also the ashes, was there any concerns for breathing? But your people did a really good job in reporting that, so I want to thank you.
Thank
Not
you.
only you and also all the firefighters from throughout, all agencies really went out and responded, to that major fire that was there going back to the 1900s. Many people worked there in Oxnard, and Ali, I want to thank your people, for the good job that they did in reporting
Thank you
that.
very much.
Thank you, Madam.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Mayor. And any other questions or comments for Mr. Ghazenmi? All right. We will go on to item number 9, and we have a presentation from the Port Hueneme, so I will have Mr. Ghazenmi make that introduction.
Item 9 and item 10, actually, both items, the following two items are for the board, for your board informational only. Before I leave, I would like to thank both Mr. Giles Pettiford, Environmental Manager of Port of Hueneme, and Mr. Mark Grady, Senior District Manager for Simi Valley Landfill, who are present here today to address the issues raised by your board regarding Chiquita Canyon landfill incident and shore power system breakdown at Port of Hueneme. Now I'm going to ask Mr. Giles to come to the podium and introduce himself, and at the same time provide you with the presentation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Lopez and board members. Very happy to join you this afternoon and give you some background on a situation that's been untangling since December. So let's just jump right into this. Just as a quick background reminder on some of the particulars on the port, of course. We are the only deepwater commercial seaport between Los Angeles and San Francisco. And in that unique role, we are, a kind of a powerhouse, punching above our weight, a #1 West Coast banana port. Those come through in those refrigerated containers, Del Monte and Chiquita, Banana One. We are the #6 West Coast container port, and additionally the #6 U.S. auto port, because that's the other big half of our operations, of course, automobiles. And we are within the top 10% of U.S. ports for autos and fresh produce. All that being said, we are doing well. Logistics and cargo is one element of the U.S. economy that has been strong, particularly since the pandemic. We saw some limited downturn in 2020 that was followed by a little bit of an upsurge. And this is happening at a time when other portions of the county's GDP have been struggling a little bit, and trade is really the most active component of that portion, with almost $3 billion in economic impact. And we are always eager to point out that 25,000 job number associated. That's, of course, indirect and induced, not just direct as well. Of the jobs that are direct, that 3,500 number, approximately 60 to 70% of those are local folks who work directly within the communities of the city of Port Hueneme and the city of Oxnard. So we are a major local employer. That salary base is returning into our local economy, driving a tremendous amount of activity. And those jobs have increased substantially. That 40% increase since 2018 is, again, going through that percentage breakdown of putting a shot in the arm of our local economy. For the port, in part because of our location, because of the nature of our work, because of our size and our sort of proximity, community is the foundation, I would argue, of everything that we do and everything we need to continue to do. And this is not just a nice-to-have mission statement or something that's sort of brought on after the fact. This is really at the core of my work as the environmental manager at the port. I see my duty as delivering on the social license that we receive from the people of the community of Oxnard and Port Hueneme, particularly the South Oxnard community, as it is a historically overburdened community that is long overdue in receiving relief from both environmental and industrial pollution. And we seek to play a big role in that transition. So For us, things like our education outreach for local schools, the food outreach we did, particularly during pandemic under Miguel Rodriguez's leadership, through the support of our board, exposure for kids who historically have not had a seat at the table in fields like engineering, maritime, and STEM. We are trying to force our way into those spaces and make a seat at the table for those community members and those young people to really exert their desire to be part of this climate change solution locally, which is something that is sorely lacking, right? Opportunities for young people to have careers in this space are very limited. We really want to grow that piece and get them familiar with the technology, get them familiar with the work. Another slide pointing out just that we have appreciating operating revenues over the last 4 fiscal years with, of course, significant operating expenses. We point out that size of that operating expense because it's not cheap running a port next to the ocean. As many of you know, we rely on machinery. We rely on heavy-duty, complicated, both diesel and electrical systems to move cans and cars, right? Every single one of those cans of bananas weighs 80,000 pounds. It is a huge energy-intensive endeavor, and in that highly corrosive marine environment, stuff wears out and takes a lot of use and abuse. So that drives a tremendous amount of that operating expense. So let's talk about shore power. Let's pivot and look at this video. This is a video from about 3 years ago. Those are longshoremen. They are pulling down a high voltage cable that operates on 6,600 volts. So 6,600 volts, not a wall plug, not an orange extension cord from Home Depot. This is a highly, highly specialized high voltage piece of equipment that plugs into that vault right there. But what it does is incredible. You can see the engineers there connecting the keys to energize that system and begin to draw power from the grid, from Southern California Edison, to enable that ship to run all of its activities while it's at the dock at Wainimi on electrical power, not on fossil fuels, as it would do everywhere else in the world. So this is a critical element in this. Right now, the California Air Resources Board is the only environmental regulatory body outside of some developing rules in the EU where this type of stuff is required. So what that translates into is a very unique set of skills and sets of equipment that are very specialized, very expensive, but drive a huge public health benefit. So let's talk about what happened. December 21st, 2023, excuse me, we've had a pretty strong El Nino storm series this last 3 months. This was really the opening salvo of classic late season El Nino, bringing tremendous precipitation in the latter half of the rain year. This that you see on that image is a radar return. So that's basically a radar image from about 3 a.m. that morning. And the reason this is significant is because that purple polygon that you see sort of floating over most of eastern Oxnard and, western Oxnard and then up into Saticoy and unincorporated Ventura County, that is a tornado warning polygon. That was issued by NOAA that night. Your phone may have buzzed that night with tornado warning. It's a twister, it's a twister. You know, I mean, unprecedented, right? Who would have ever thought in coastal Ventura County we would have a tornado warning? Well, I ask you to sort of look on the right-hand side of that highly colorful red and yellow area where it says El Rio, Saticoy, and Oxnard, especially that area, that kind of bulbous part right below the D in Oxnard. That is extremely dynamic convective activity. So that means there was basically a water and temperature party going on in those clouds in a very small area. And that level of intensity drives like historic precipitation. This is the kind of activity that you see with more typical things like hurricanes and tropical storm events. This is very, very atypical for Ventura County. This is also a very strong indication that the fingerprints of climate change were all over this event. And we'll get into what that means in a little bit, but we just put this up as a tool to communicate the intensity and the uniqueness of this storm event and an indication of what may be to come and what we need to do about that. So what happened with that was, oh, here's some more, just a little more context, if you will. Daniel Swain is a UCLA climate scientist. He's a young scientist at UCLA. He's very active on social media, on YouTube. He is one of the leading voices of communicating climate science to the public, and is particularly capable at describing how climate change is changing historical norms of weather in California. So he basically said this is very likely the heaviest rainfall ever observed in this area, and likely a multi-centennial kind of event. Again, context of what we saw. So more than 3 inches of rain falling in about 55 minutes. That's like Florida, that's tropical, right? That image on the right-hand side of the screen there, you can see is the northern side of the port. That is the Clara Street gate into the port in the background. So this is up toward the boundary of Naval Base Ventura County, the port, and the city of Port Hueneme right there. This image was taken around 2:15. On the right-hand side, that sort of swirl of debris, that is not land, that is beauty bark that has washed into the port from the adjacent community. What happened that night was that the scale of water coming down from the sky so quickly and so fast was so significant that it inundated the MS4, so the storm and surface water management system for the city of Port Hueneme, the city of Oxnard, and Naval Base Ventura County. We're at the bottom of that whole system. We're the receiver of all of that surface runoff. All of that system was inundated, overwhelmed, and flooding. That water ran downhill, and we're at the receiving end of that water, being at the downhill end of that, the lowest elevation at the ocean. That drove most of the flooding that we saw on port that night. So we had a crews in action within about half an hour. We had folks out there at 2:15 that morning, getting a Vector truck from the city, clearing drains with a backhoe, working all the way through the night. To do the video, do I have to just press the, oh, there it goes. So now, if you can, we're on that whole area behind there where the truck is driving, that's where the Banana Festival happens. So we're in the southeastern corner of the port now, adjacent to Anacapa View and other residential homes on the eastern side of the port, looking east. In the foreground, that infrastructure that you see right there is the shore power infrastructure. So that is the transformers and switchgear that click on when the ship plugs in the video we saw earlier. That right now is under almost 3 feet of water. Water and high voltage is a very, very bad combination, unfortunately. This is back to the northern side, again, looking north now toward Naval Base Ventura County and that same Clara Street gate. Those are BMWs on the left there. Again, multiple feet of water with the flow coming from the right of the screen to the left of the screen. Oh, video, there we go. Yep, Clara Street, inundation, there you go, once again. This is a drain right next to the Clara Street gate. This is as it was being cleared by our crew. You can see the beauty bark and all this debris, and then a whirlpool, denoting kind of the scale of water that we had coming in there. Now, this is the following morning, daylight. You can see scorch marks within that shore power substation there on the right-hand side. This is all the electrical substation equipment that is part of that shore power gear. Again, scorching, again, moisture. This is the vault. This is the vault on the dock. That's the vault we saw in that opening earlier video where the gentlemen were plugging in the plug. It's not supposed to look like that. There should not be water pouring into that system. Again, just pointing to that intensity. We did have a ship plugged in at that time when this storm hit. The next morning, more of this, just additional insight. This is within the city now. That's the Clara Street gate. This is a little further north and northeast. The city of Port Hueneme really took a big blow with this city. There was tremendous residential damage just in the communities adjacent. So what did we do? Well, our Board of Harbor Commissioners very quickly put out an emergency ordinance. They approved it on the 29th to try and begin the process of addressing. We had to figure out what had happened. It wasn't immediately evident because when the system blacked out, we couldn't turn it back on. SCE had turned all of their equipment off. We needed to unpack and understand post-mortem what had happened. So That has been a huge effort over the last 2 months. We have been trying to get an understanding, very, very detailed engineering understanding of what is the scope of what happened and how do we fix it. So the answer there is basically a full rebuild of the system, unfortunately. That is a worst case scenario. That entire shore power system was damaged beyond its ability to be repaired and recertified. So that means we need about $40 million because that is the initial engineering estimate to rebuild that system to the current standard to be able to plug ships into that system. We are going to do this, but it's going to cost a lot of money. So this is a quick overview of all the things we have been doing. We have been having conversations. This is basically all I do these days, amongst, well, some other stuff too, but a very heavy all hands on with this system. We are urgently pursuing every funding opportunity, insurance, Cal OES, FEMA, all of these conversations around getting an idea of what we can do to get money to rebuild this system. They will, of course, be public funds. We are a public agency. We have to dot our I's, cross our T's, follow all of those processes. We cannot skip steps, obviously. That is going to drive some time. The other element in this, of course, is that decarbonization, electrification is hot business right now. Everybody in the state of California is frantically trying to get the same equipment. Competition for equipment that's already handmade, expensive, and in limited supply means longer lead times. So that is just our reality right now. So we are looking at probably 1.5 years for a full rebuild of that system, just due to those challenges. In the meantime, we are engaging with CARB. Obviously, CARB has the rule that requires the ships to plug in. We have to understand what is their outlook on how this situation plays out, force majeure, act of nature, who knows what you want to call it. We're engaged in those conversations. It's been a little bit of a slow process because they're very busy with other tasks, but we're looking at an April visit by some CARB staff to the port to get them actually down here to see stuff, but we are committed to engaging in that. Additionally, those 3 company names you see on the bottom there, CAEM, Aris, and Stax, those are companies that build these systems you see right there. These are fairly experimental, but mostly CARB approved emission capture and control systems. So it is essentially a barge-based system with a couple of different chemical and physical filter media that are attached to a Dr. Seussian type of arm that connects to the stack of the ship and shop vacs out the pollution and then chemically and physically filters it and eliminates 90-some-odd% of all of the emissions. These have only ever operated. You can see this is on an MSC ship. This is down in Long Beach. That's very clearly not Wainimi in the background. These have only recently begun to be approved by CARB in the last 3 months. We are engaging with those companies to get a system potentially for Wainimi. With public money, we of course have to go through a public RFP process for this. We're hoping to get that RFP out in the coming weeks and get answers very quickly on how soon we could get one of these systems deployed. These systems will also play a very big role in another shore power system. So right, we were talking the south terminal where the container ships plug in. The north terminal where our auto carrier RoRo ships dock and offload the cars. That same CARB regulation, January 1st of 2025, mandates those emissions from those vessels begin emission control requirements January 1st, 2025. None of those carriers globally have retrofitted ships yet. And there's a whole variety of reasons from the Red Sea situation and the war in Ukraine to the pandemic to that, which I don't have to go into today. But essentially means we will be having another one of these systems brought to the port in January to do that physical filtering for the auto carrier RoRo side of the house. And we will also be building another shore power system for those same vessel category on the north side. So in about 2 years, we will have double shore power systems operating on different voltage standards, plugging in different categories of vessels, achieving almost 100% emission capture for all the ships coming in. So it's a frustrating situation. We see this as hopefully a bump in the road on our pathway. We have amazing support. Some of you are even in this photo where we are trying to draw attention to the need and to the hill we all have to climb, but we can climb it together. And lastly, I'll wrap up with talking about recent work we have been doing with an eye toward decarbonization and zero emission planning. I think I came in here a couple years ago and told you all about this Energy Commission funded blueprint to decarbonization. This is the punchline. This is the story. 2030 is our estimated date by which we will have all of our systems inside the gate zero emission, barring ships and drayage trucking, because that's a whole nother conversation. But essentially, this situation is not going to change our outlook on achieving 2030. We're still committed to that. We are still lined up and ready to go to meet that, both engineering and funding-wise. This is what this will look like. This is where, this is the actual results. Those are emissions. This is CO2 equivalent, so greenhouse gases. That is what we want to see. This decreasing curve to zero on GHG, criteria pollutants, DPM, you name it, this is what we want to get to. That is the direct result of electrification and decarbonization. That is change. That is good for public health. That is, exactly what we want. So let's talk just very briefly. I promise this will be it and I'll wrap up. Ironically, we were set to start a sea level rise study March 1st with federal funding. We knew that rising ocean levels posed a risk to our infrastructure, as they do to all coastal infrastructure in California. We are not unique in this risk. We are not alone in facing this challenge together. We are not alone in realizing it's going to be expensive, but we got some time, right? We've got maybe a decade, maybe a little more. Well, here's the problem. Our climate bingo card did not have torrential atmospheric river precipitation 3 inches in 1 hour on it. Therefore, all adaptation planning, all coastal resiliency planning, not just ours, but everybody's, needs to begin to incorporate this type of precipitation event and begin actual adaptation, elevating stuff, building in moats and sump pumps and drainage systems to accommodate these kind of potential flows. I can tell you right now that the data to model those flows doesn't yet exist. NOAA doesn't have it, the state doesn't have it. They know they need to develop it. So we are going to be having this conversation in this climate action plan we're going to be doing in the coming months. And we will be having to have that conversation with NOAA and other entities to say, how do we model this rain likelihood? How many inches per hour do we need to account for? How do we build for that in the future? How do we retrofit to that for existing infrastructure? And I'm more than happy to come back and share that with all of you or the Board of Supervisors, whoever wants to hear it. But these are the kinds of analyses that we have to do to protect POTWs at the coast, protect schools, hospitals, anything where you've got infrastructure near a coast. This is a reality that we all have to adapt to. So I think that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions. I apologize for talking at you for so long. I tend to do that when given a microphone, but appreciate your time.
Thank you, Giles. And any questions? Mayor Zaragoza?
I just want to thank you for excellent presentation, and Kristen, you look pretty nice today. I know she couldn't be here today. But again, I want to thank you for the adaptation plan that you put together. I know in the city of Oxnard, we're also working with that.
Yes.
And I remember that rain, it just came down. I could not believe. Right after it happened, I got calls like you would not believe. I didn't sleep that night, working with our city manager, working with our firefighters, our public works department. And it was just coming down like you would absolutely could not believe that. 6-point-something inches, that deep, just unbelievable. But I just want to thank you for that and the resiliency that the harbor has, because you provide excellent jobs. I know we're looking at a lot of the jobs I know are in Oxnard, but it really affects the entire county because the money that's spent there really helps the entire county. And I would tell you that pay that you pay your individuals are excellent pay, because I used to prepare income taxes before, and I said, hey, I'm in the wrong business. I should be out there working in the harbor, but also working with South Oxnard, I think is extremely important, because it's an underserved community and it really needs a lot of help. Yeah. So I think it's really going to help a lot. And also one of the things that I like to share with you, and I know you spoke a lot about the rain and what you're doing, which is excellent. but also the harbor does a lot of good for the community. They're always giving food, helping different festivities and so forth. And one of the great things I like too is the Banana Festival. The only concern I had about the last Banana Festival is that they were giving out bananas, and I went to get a banana, and they were out. But
It's popular, yes.
But again, like I said, thank you again for excellent presentation. And by the way, just board members, I invited Christian to speak at our city council
Okay.
here, and we're just probably the next couple of weeks, we're going to make a presentation to our city council to share the good things that the harbor's doing. So
Yeah,
I
appreciate
commend you for the good work that you're doing.
Yeah.
And excellent work, and thank you on behalf of the city of Oxnard. By the way, we're giving out about $200-some thousand for some of the folks. We're giving $1,000 per household, which is really not much, but it's $1,000 really helps, individuals with their help. So right now they're going over, they can prove that they lived at address A or B or C. We'll give them $1,000 for them to help out. And we also are working with other agencies to try to get them insurance payments or low interest loans, and some loans that are long-term loans that are really going to help our residents. But again, thank you for an excellent
Yeah,
presentation.
thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to start. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Mr. Whitman.
You mentioned that you showed us a photograph of the shore power infrastructure and said this is now 3 feet underwater. And I'm just curious what are the circumstances that have led to that?
So it's a great question. How did this happen? It reflects the state of the engineering at the time that all of the surface water drainage infrastructure surrounding the port were all built. So that would be from the 40s through till about the 80s. A few newer additions in there, but really in that chunk of time where all of the engineering standards to which catch basins, pipes, et cetera, are built out to were based on precipitation models and precipitation data from the 1970s and before. Nothing in our currently built system is prepared for or reflective of the level of water that is anticipated to come with climate change. Because if you can think of our rain events as really a sine wave of peaks and troughs, just like an ocean wave, the intensity of that frequency is expected to begin to accelerate. So steeper curves up, steeper curves down, just like we saw this year. We're already switching into a La Nina year in the Central Pacific. So that's going to drive drought swinging back. These really, very sharp pivots from high amounts of rain, high intensity storm events. I talked to a climate scientist at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography the week after the storm event, because I wanted to understand. I said, how do I get my head around what role did climate change play in what happened that night? And he said, well, you're asking a question that hundreds of other scientists want to have the answer to as well. And there is no really definitive answer, but this has all of the hallmarks of what we anticipate the future to continue to look like. So not that we're going to go from this storm, by the way, almost doubled the NOAA estimate of a 1,000-year storm event for Oxnard, Port Hueneme. That's the kind of scale of uncertainty here in this change. The expectation is not that we're going to go from a 1,000-year storm event to a 100,000-year storm event to a million-year storm event. It's more likely to be something like the 1,000-year storm event, but you might get 2 in a month, or you might get 2 in 1 week, or you might get 3 in a season where historically you would get 1 every couple hundred years. That's the signal we're expecting to see. So to answer your question, it was really infrastructure that was built to a historical number from years ago that is not reflective of what's happening in our atmosphere these days. And the amount of water put down was so overwhelming that the system was draining, but it was draining through a pipe that's only this big where it really needed a pipe this big. And all of that extra water continued to flow downstream as it always does, and most of that ended up on the port because of just being at the lowest point in that connection right into the ocean. And then additionally, there was also a lot of debris. There was Christmas decorations, there was beauty bark, there was all kinds of stuff clogging infrastructure as well. So we're not saying any of that to point any fingers. This is just the reality of operating a surface drainage system. I mean, you can talk to the county stormwater folks. The MS4 system that manages stormwater and surface water for the county, as every jurisdiction, gets full of sediment. And every time you add, let's say you add 10% sediment to an MS4 system, you're effectively removing 10% of the capacity of that system to manage flow. And when you set an operations and maintenance standard for cleaning those systems, the place I worked at up in the county I worked for up in Seattle, it was a 30% number. So the system could be 30% full of sediment before they went and cleaned it. That translates into effectively removing 30% of that capacity. So, you know, as administrators of a public system that serves the public good by draining surface water, we've got to think of these challenges of, well, if our system was already handicapped and now we're putting more load on it, how do we manage that? And I'm sorry for speaking at length to your question, but that's really the nature of things. What we do rebuild, though, will need to be built to a much more conservative expectation of future rain and be elevated, have a moat around it, have sump pumps.
Great. Thanks.
Thank you. Supervisor Lavier and then Councilmember Campos.
Just real quick, thanks for the presentation, Charles. So when the offshore energy system,
To use
or the onshore
mic.
energy system. Thanks. When the onshore energy system's down, that's when, so the ships will have to use fossil fuels
Correct.
to power, and that's what those barge-based filtration systems are
Exactly.
for when the ships are needing to use fossil fuels?
Correct, correct. And that reality is how everything happened at the port pre-2014 when shore power came online for the first time. This is unfortunately going back to that historical model. Now, the nuance in that is that the fuels are cleaner than what historically, and I don't mean to make that as an excuse for the situation we're in. This is still going to produce pollution that will affect the community. That is inevitable in this situation. I think about that every single day. I think about the burden on the community of, you know, already taking in historical levels of pollution. But the fuel that is now being burned in those auxiliary engines is the cleanest fuel that's being burned in shipping equipment anywhere in the world. And again, that's a CARB regulation. Yeah.
First, I want to thank you sincerely for the presentation, but also the port itself has been recognizing and working on climate issues for so long that even though you experienced the worst of this, you've stood up as a model for all the cities in the county. And I really want to thank you for that and ask if it's okay to share this presentation all over our
Absolutely.
cities.
I mean, we really, unfortunately, as the situation is, perhaps there's a silver lining in that I tend to talk a lot in meetings about this stuff, partly because we're really passionate about it and we see the need as not just urgent, but like beyond urgent. It's a prerequisite to living in the day and age that we all live in. As much as we can be a guinea pig or taking on this role of figuring out some of these questions, we want to share that with everybody, not just other ports, but other cities too. I mean, even county coastal communities, the POTW in Oxnard and the POTW in Ventura need to think long and hard about their infrastructure risk associated with this kind of storm event. I mean, if that storm, that red edge of that storm had been a mile further east, I don't know what would have happened to the treatment plant on Perkins. Yeah. I hate to think. So
That was one of the major concerns we had, exactly right what you said, you know, really
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah.
1 mile difference.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That
Sorry for interrupting.
that roll of the dice is our future, unfortunately. Yeah.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much, Giles, and thank you to the port for being a partner and finding ways, I mean, recognizing the impacts and what the role of the port is in the community, whether it's the economy, it's jobs, workforce, it's being a friendly neighbor to the city of Port Hueneme, the city of Oxnard, and even the entire county of Ventura. And as you begin this process of rebuilding, is there anything, any other mitigation efforts to help the surrounding community with? I mean, since the shoreside power has been in service, I mean, it's helped the neighboring
Absolutely.
community. So, what can the surrounding neighborhoods expect? I mean, what are you all looking at?
So we're looking at a couple of things. Obviously, we have a whole slew of publicly funded projects coming online, predating the storm event, obviously, with state money from Caltrans, that PFIP money, the 80 million and change. That is a very aggressive timeline of 5 years of projects. It's about 16 to 18 projects, depending on how you bucket them. Almost all of those, even if they are not like putting in a plug directly, they are preparing the surface of the port, the wharf of the port, to receive either electrical equipment or like charging infrastructure directly. So that set of projects is going to be foundational for readying, just like the ground surface, the wharf edge, everything to be operating in a zero emission future. So that's foundational because, again, we're talking about infrastructure built in the 40s and 50s and 60s, renovating that up to current standards. So that will enable, when we do rebuild shore power, those bigger ships to be able to not damage the wharf or be ready for that plug-in event. The other one is that the federal EPA just put out an unprecedented lump of money called the Clean Ports Fund. It is estimated to be around $2.8 billion for both zero-emission equipment and zero-emission infrastructure. This is the hottest ticket in town nationally because it's open not only to water ports, inland ports, but also, again, what they call dry ports inland. So there's going to be massive competition for this as well. But they're on some pretty aggressive timelines. This is funded by Biden's infrastructure, the IRA, and we are anticipating to apply for that for more cargo handling equipment and more plug-in infrastructure for being able to transition all of that stuff over to clean grid power. The due date for those applications is around June. I think it's May 28th, thereabouts. So we're gonna continue to push on those opportunities as well. And then it's looking at every sort of nook and cranny we can get to try and accelerate this project of, getting the engineering done, getting the permits done, getting the system built, and or getting that bonnet system here as quickly as we potentially can. And that has to go out to RFP as well. So it's, just all of the administrative bureaucratic process of being a public agency, but very well intentioned, but we're pushing. Oh, and the other thing I must put a plug in for is that we are in the process of beginning a public project in coalition with Cal State Channel Islands, VCAPCD directly, and then also Seafrog on putting out additional air quality monitoring units that are of the same flavor as the one that we installed at Haycox Elementary about 5 years ago. So again, just very quickly, I've said that a lot, these monitors measure byproducts of fossil fuel combustion. They're not measuring dust or PM 2.5, these are measuring what they call black carbon, which is basically an accepted surrogate for diesel soot. So we're hoping to get 4 more of these monitors. We're going to wait and see how the numbers crunch out. But that public process, working with Seafrog, CSU, CIV, CAPCD, is just kicking off. So we already know we have a number of community organizations, a number of community members who've expressed interest in participating in that. And we want to, we will take the complaints, the burden, the upset, the anger, the frustration, all of that, because we owe that to the community to bear that burden, because this is what we do. And that's just how we need to do things. So those numbers, facilitating community level understanding of what air quality in Ventura County looks like, is a very good thing for our voice being heard in DC and Sacramento to get additional funding here to drive more transition away from fossil fuels.
Thank you. And you definitely, your passion flows through the mic and your presentation in every space. So appreciate that work. So we do have one public comment for this item.
Correct. I believe it's a public comment. Do we have a Greg Ross present? Please come forward to the podium. You'll have 5 minutes to speak. It's not clear if you have questions or comments. Right now is just the time for any comments that you want the board to hear. So please proceed.
Good afternoon. Thanks for listening. I live in the 93041 zip code, right adjacent to the port. Been a Ventura County resident since 1970. Lived in South Oxnard and Silver Strand for 10 years. We never had a cough in our household, except for a cold here and there. And since we've moved to the east side of the port, you know which way the prevailing wind flows, right? It comes across the port into South Oxnard to the east, southeast Oxnard, and Port Hueneme, South Port Hueneme. Since we moved there a year and change ago, constantly have a cough. So the pollution is still major problem in our view. And we maybe I'm not looking in the right places, but I don't see any transparency from this elementary school monitoring system. I don't know that that's been published, what particulate matter is up there. 10 people in the last 10 years on our block have died of cancer. And so I know it's a big, steep climb for the port to deal with what they've had to deal with, but frankly, we'd like more transparency about the actual numbers of pollutant, particulate matter. And that's what we're looking for. I know Seafrog is really helping, and I appreciate that. Giles made a presentation to the City Council of Port Hueneme a couple weeks ago, and he mentioned that some of the pollution that the Ventura County is seeing in South Oxnard and Port Hueneme is coming from the 101 freeway. And I'm not a scientist, but I do believe in science. And with the air, the main wind patterns, I don't see how that could possibly be influencing our pollution issues in South Oxnard, Port Hueneme. The port has got an uphill climb, and this barge system is really going to help. It can't come soon enough. It's only March, and we're looking at another 9 months of this with these diesel engines. I grew up overseas. I grew up in Argentina, and I'll tell you, they burned really dirty diesel, and you can smell it. We clean our screens, and the white towels come out black. So it's an issue that we're all looking at, and we really want to support the port because they are a really big part of our community. Just want the pollution to be put at bay and to see some numbers so we know what we're breathing. So that's all I've got. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Ross, and you have a person here directly from the port who I think you can connect with directly. So, and with that, I don't think we have any other public comments.
That's correct. We've received no other requests from the public to speak. Thank you.
All right, and if there's no other comments or questions from the board, then we will go on to item number 10, the next presentation.
Item number 10.
And thank you, Giles, again. Thank you for being here.
Item number 10, Mr. Mark Grady will be presenting to your board regarding the issue regarding Chiquita Canyon landfill and about the possibility of happening, similar incident will be happening in actually Ventura County. Thank you.
No problem. I'll do my best to follow Giles up here. But good afternoon, Chair Lopez and board. I'm going to do my best here to teach you about what we do and how we do it and why we don't have to worry too much about similar things up here. So my name is Mark Grady. I'm actually the Area Recycling Director for Waste Management. I have been the Senior District Manager for our Simi Valley Landfill and Recycling Center for the past handful of years. And recently, Nicole Stetson, who is here with us, took over. She's been managing landfills with WM in Southern California for the past 15 years. So definitely in capable hands, and I'm still a huge part of the facility and really want to make sure that what people see here in the county, they believe in us and know that we're doing a really good job. I also have Miriam Cardenas here. She's our Environmental Protection Manager here in Southern California. She has a team that actually sits at our facility and does reporting and deals with the regulators that we have here in Ventura County. So with that, I think I'm okay. So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on the facility just real quick. So we're a fully permitted Class 3 municipal solid waste landfill. We accept non-hazardous municipal solid waste. It is a modern landfill. Landfills that your parents and grandparents may be accustomed to aren't quite what they are now. There are other parts to the facility that many people don't know about. We do a lot of recycling. We have one of the largest green waste recycling operations in the state. We have a construction and demolition recycling program, as well as a single stream recycling transfer station. The materials that do come into the landfill get categorized, and most of them are actually beneficially reused. Over 50% of the volume that comes in has a higher purpose. It's not all just buried in the landfill. So the facility is permitted at 12,000 tons per day. It's been in service for 50 years within the county. But I think it would be good to get into a little bit of just design of landfill to give some perspective, because I don't think this is what you guys deal with every day. So with that, so a modern landfill starts in the design phase. There's engineers, consultants that help design the landfill with our staff. We have a lot of engineers and scientists that work at WM to design these facilities. These designs include layers of geomembrane, geotextiles, clay, gravel, all these different things that get rolled up to the state. So Cal Recycle and the Water Board then will review it, approve it, and then we can start construction. Construction phase is heavily monitored. There's regulators there the entire time. There's professional engineers overseeing it. And really what we're doing in simple terms is building a big bowl. Picture your bowl of cereal holding everything in. We're building a really complex version of that. And then the waste is placed within that. So once we start placing the waste naturally will degrade and create landfill gas, which is managed through landfill gas wells and flares. There's liquid condensation that's part of that we also manage. But at a high level, that's really what's going on at a standard landfill. So with that, I'll start getting into some of the specifics about our facility and some of the regulatory structure around it. And then I'll get into the infrastructure and what we do that's above and beyond the regulations that can give you some assurances. So at our Simi Valley Landfill and Recycling Center, we have over 300 landfill gas wells. And you may ask, what does that mean? And standard landfills throughout the country, you'll have about one landfill gas well for every 2 acres. Our facility has over 300, and we don't even have 300 acres of landfill built. So we have an incredibly high density of wells, giving us a lot of capabilities to control that landfill gas. And that's very important from a regulatory perspective, not just managing the facility. So around the facility, there's a series of landfill gas perimeter probes. Many of you, I think, have been on a tour of the facility and may have seen the little yellow casings around the outside. These are probes that are regularly monitored by our team, but as well as the state. The state does numerous unannounced inspections. There's actually probably an agency every week out there checking us. And we're not, I think we've said this before, we're not afraid of that. Come see what we're doing. We like to show off. But those probes are monitored to ensure that gas is not migrating. We also do surface emissions monitoring regularly. These are people walking around with sniffers, ensuring that we're within the regulatory standards that are established. The state also comes out, our local air district comes out and does that same work at our facility. All of that ties back into the landfill gas system. So having the robust system, all these wells, they're then tied into our flares. So the current control system is sending the landfill gas to 2 ultra-low NOx flares. That's the best available control technology right now. Those 2 flares have more capacity than the landfill produces, which gives us assurances for the near term. And there's some things we can talk about near the end that will give you assurances we're well ahead of this with permits we've submitted years ago to increase landfill gas collection. Infrastructure is great, but I got to talk about the team. So I want you to understand kind of the background of how WM sets our team up. So we have our operations group, but then on top of that, we have a landfill gas team on site. Consists of multiple landfill gas technicians. The technicians are specifically trained. They go to school for this. And they go out and they actually monitor the wells. They tune the wells or adjust them. They monitor the probes. They do surface emissions monitoring. We have data systems to capture all that data so we can trend what may be going on. And all that data is then reported into a gas operations manager. Our gas operations manager is a professional engineer. These are highly technical people with technical systems. He then will work with us to review the data, look at trends, find where we want to invest future money. But I think uniquely, and what can really give you some confidence is that person doesn't report to the site manager. They have a completely separate reporting structure. They go up through our corporate group, where us being the largest landfill manager in the United States, we have a very robust support system to review all this data. And that's the same thing for a health and safety and environmental manager. They didn't report to me at the site. They had no loyalty to me. They had to make sure they did the right thing because that's their job. So with that, we'll go to the next slide. We're gonna get a little bit more in depth here. I'm gonna do my best to walk through the picture on the slide, but I'll start with the flares. So I had made a comment about permits. So I would say it's about 4 years ago now, we submitted an updated permit for our renewable natural gas facility. We'll talk about it in a bit more depth on the next slide, but that also includes an additional flare. Ultimately, once constructed next year, we'll actually have more than twice the capacity we do right now, and we are already above the capacity to control the gas. So we're in a very good spot, and we're setting the facility up to be in a good spot throughout the life of the facility. Then I'm going to get into this picture that you see on the slide here. I'll do my best to explain it in simple terms, but we'll start at the very top. So at the top, you have our landfill gas wells. The wells have a wellhead on it. There are ports that we actually monitor. We can see all these different parameters and adjust and tune so we can maximize collection efficiency. It's not just pull as hard as you can on the landfill. There's a balance, and you keep it in balance. You want to manage your pressures, your temperatures, and your liquids. And by keeping them in balance, you keep a very happy landfill. These wells are connected to the pipe that extends down into the ground. That's actually where we're collecting the gas. The pipe goes down, there's screened portions that will allow the gas to be collected. Over a decade ago, we began using a different type of material that's a higher quality. The main reason is it's more durable. So to deal with the differential settlement in the landfill, any temperatures in the landfill, anything that could be happening that could break our traditional wells that were PVC, we've already adjusted and invested in. This gives you better longevity. You don't have to worry about them maybe collapsing or anything bad like that. The other thing when you look at this slide that it doesn't show you is, the landfill is shaped like a hill or like a pyramid, right? So as you go out on the left or the right, you have to collect at different areas. It's not just put them in the top and you're done. You got to work on the outside. So we look at our right side here, we have a tiered vertical system. So as you go out across the landfill, these wells tie in vertically at different heights. So we have different capabilities at different cross sections of the landfill. We're dealing with a three-dimensional object. This isn't just on a piece of paper. And those are all tied into different gravel or liquid conveyance systems. So as you collect the gas, there's condensation in it. Just like at home when you're boiling something, that liquid needs a pathway to escape, and it'll travel all the way down to the bottom. When we design our landfills now, we design structures as part of the upfront design to manage liquids long-term. So to ensure that you're able to collect those liquids and able to keep the gas flowing, we oversize these structures. There's a little bit more science to it, but by installing these early, you can ensure that we have ample capacity to collect liquids. I'll then move on to the left side where you see this horizontal structure. So we talk about a lot of things that WM does to go above and beyond the regulatory standards. So I mentioned density, which is very important, but these horizontal collectors are unique to here at our Simi Valley landfill. There's a few different benefits. So as we start placing the waste, you can picture the waste mass is very thin. So you have to do something to collect that gas that's being created horizontally. So that can do that. And that allows us to continue and fill over that while collecting gas. There's a couple other benefits. Sometimes there's shallow areas of the landfill that may be closer to liners. You want to be able to put that horizontal collector in to capture those or mitigate any of those emissions. This is something that we started here at Simi Valley, and it's moving out across the country. Those are then tied into drainage pipes, and they're connected to lower levels. Again, continuing the drainage portion. And with all of these different systems, when you tie them all together, that allows us to ensure that we're keeping those parameters I mentioned in balance. And balance is really the key here. So I went through the picture just on the bullet points real quick. So we talked about the well casings or the materials we use. We've strategically upgraded those. That was many years ago. We have the improved drainage features, so the condensation in the gas can't block any of the collection efficiencies. We have the density of wells, so we can tune up and down as we need to. And then we have the regular review. That's where the people and the technicians are critical. So investing in your people to go out there and continually monitor, continually review the data is really the key to ensure that we know what's happening, we know what's not going to happen. This then ties into something we've been working on for a very long time. I'm going to start on the renewable natural gas side and then show you how this ties back to exactly what we're working on controlling here. So we've been working on this for years. Some of you, I know Supervisor Parvin's been intimately involved, but WM made a commitment to build a renewable natural gas facility here in the county. It's over $100 million investment, but the key from a landfill gas perspective, it's going to collect that landfill gas, clean it up, and then directly feed it into the pipeline, natural gas, SoCal gas pipeline. It's going to directly offset fossil fuel natural gas. And the reason that this ties into what we're talking about today is this one facility alone is going to double our landfill gas collection capabilities. So as a landfill grows over time, it will produce more gas. You have to have the ability to manage it on the back end. And if you don't have that ability, that's when you can run into challenges. This facility includes that third flare. So we're saying, you know what, let's do everything we need to manage this forever right now. The project itself has immense greenhouse gas implications. It's going to save over 100,000 tons a year of greenhouse gas emissions. It's like taking a couple thousand trucks a day off the road. But the real thing is that we submitted this project many years ago, and we worked a lot with the Air District. I was in Ali's office quite a bit. It was a challenging process. They had a lot of questions, a lot of checks and balances. Ultimately, the Air District saw the importance of managing the landfill gas collection and having the collection capabilities. And I think that says a lot about what they see and how they were foreseeing the future. So with that, it's that detailed review that they had to allow us to build this. And I think, these types of things, I hope, gives you a lot of comfort in that we have a very well-run, safe, compliant facility here in the county.
Thank you, Mark. Supervisor.
A quick question, Mark. What's the life of that landfill? What's the life of that gas? And number one, do you sell it to Southern California Edison, the electricity that's generated from that?
The first part of the question. So landfill gas, so the life of the landfill is about 40 more years of acceptance. So it has capacity to accept waste for about 40 years. You've probably heard of all these regulations changing organics and whatnot. We project out worst case for gas production, or the most gas. It'll probably take about 50 to 60 years, maybe slightly more, to manage all that. And we actively set aside money now to manage in the future. So you can be assured that once the facility is not accepting waste, we have money set aside to manage it long.
It'll continue for several years from there on,
Yes.
So I know the Santa Clara landfill over in Oxnard, it generated gas for a long, long time, that really helped out the community quite a bit, In fact, the pump went all the way out to Victoria Avenue, And so anyway, but the thing that is really innovative is a big plant. I think that's really fantastic.
We're absolutely excited about it. This is, to my knowledge, it's the largest one in the state of California.
That's what the supervisor was just,
Yeah.
she was just bragging and telling me, this is the largest.
Well, she's been a fierce proponent of this, and I think, that's where I think it's great to work in the county of Ventura. There's a lot of understanding there's compliance, there's do it the right way, but there's also the understanding of we need to do this together, and it's a partnership. And I've seen that a lot being out here the past 5 years.
So then the electricity that's generated goes right into the SCE system? Or?
It's actually I would say even better than that. Maybe that's a little subjective. But it's going to be piped directly into the SoCal gas pipeline, directly offsetting natural gas. So that's where that fossil fuel offset. So that's why the environmental benefit of this is,
that really
is
helps,
substantial,
Yeah.
which is super exciting.
Thank you, Madam.
Thank you, Mayor. Any other questions or comments for Mark? We can't let him off that easy. putting it out there. All right, well, Mark, thank you so much. This is really, really informative. I haven't had a chance to go out there. I hope I can get an invitation. Supervisor Parvin, do you want to host me?
I think I will host you. I think it would be great if we all went out there at some point. And there's also like an ecological section.
We'll take you on the full tour. There's a large nature preserve.
There we go.
We'll show you the area that Supervisor Parvin actually helped replant. It's actually done really well this year. So
That's why the flowers here, those are the ones that.
yeah, all the flowers you see,
I planted mostly trees.
you did actually. Yeah, there's a couple oak trees out there with their name on it.
Yeah.
And by the way, too, all of Oxnard waste now goes to Waste Management.
Yep. No, we work closely with Del Norte and the team
That's right.
out of that facility.
Yeah. Thank you.
Great, well, thank you
guys.
so much, and thank you for that reassurance, right? I mean, and the reason why we wanted to hear from, from this site is just given what we see happening in neighboring, counties and spaces, and so we just want to make sure that we are headed in the right direction, that we have the protections in place for safety of our community, our residents, and our environment. So I really appreciate your presence here and the presentation information and the plans moving forward on how we can be better, do better. So thank you.
Thank you, guys. You have a wonderful day.
Chair Lopez, we did have a request to speak from Rachel Jones. I do not know if she's present any longer, though. If we have a Rachel Jones, please come forward. Right, seeing no public comments, thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we will move on to item number 11. So Mr. Gazembi.
Yes. First, I want to thank actually Giles and Mark for being here and giving the presentation to my board. But I know that it took too long, and I want to be going fast to finish the last item for you. For the record, Ali Qasemi, Executive Officer of Ventura County APCD. For this item, we are asking your board to approve an MOU contract between APCD and Oxnard Harbor District. Giles already actually went through that, but just give you a background, the Oxnard Harbor District was awarded about $500,000 from EPA, American Red Cross Rescue Plan, which is part of the IRA, which is the Inflation Reduction Act, to conduct ambient air monitoring around the Oxnard Harbor districts by installing 4 air monitoring stations and to establish a technical advisory committee as well as a community advisory committee. This grant will support community and local efforts to help understand and communicate the air pollution burden from the Port of Huenemi's operation in communities surrounding the port. The district was selected as a partner and sub-recipient of this EPA grant. In consideration of receiving the $10,000 grant, the district must provide input and guidance to the project. That's all I have, and I'm ready to answer any question you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Gazembi. Any questions or comments?
Nope.
Do we, will we hear back about just updates as to how this project
Of
is
course.
going? Okay.
Of
All
course.
right. All right. Any motion?
Move to approve. Second.
All right. We have a motion to second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed or abstentions? Okay, well, that brings us to the end, and if there's no further business, then we will go ahead and adjourn.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you very much.
Thank you.